Hey, I'm Ellen. Just crossed 45 and I line up the numbers for a living, crunching them from my home workspace, a perk my husband, Jake, is all in for. It's an arrangement that's got the thumbs up from my folks too, since they're the brains behind a sports store which Jake's been running. Jake took charge of the family business a bit after we got hitched. He was the life of the place, and now at 45, I'm still at home doing the books while he's the main guy at the shop. We got on like a house on fire in the beginning. I was 37 when we clicked, kind of late-ish, but he was worth it. Making everyone laugh was his thing, and my parents liked him straight away. Didn't matter to us, we didn't have kids. He was cool with it, really cool. Life was sweet. We ate together, shared house jobs, the works. But as the years ticked by, things kind of soured. He'd come home only when the streets were empty, and I'd be alone cleaning and making sure everything was right at home. When I'd ask for a bit of help, he'd just say, "That's all on you." And then the whole world tilted off its axis with a stupid ping from Jake's phone. It was a mess up on his part, leaving his phone behind like that. I heard the noise while I was in the middle of something and thought it was weird. His phone lit up with messages that made my heart stop. It was like being punched in the gut, seeing words that shouldn't be there. No beating around the bush, the messages were spicy, the kind that you don't send to someone's husband. But I didn't have much, just a few messages that could mean anything. When the man came out of the shower looking for his phone, I was cool. "You forgot this," I said and slid the phone over. His hand snatched it up quick. "Thanks," he mumbled, and before diving into his inbox, he asked, "Anything interesting happen while I was gone?" I considered for a quick second whether to throw it all in his face, make a big scene. But I had zilch. No concrete proof, just a gut feeling and some ambiguous texts. So I shrugged. Same old. He nodded and dived into whatever it was that needed his urgent attention. "Always a crisis somewhere," he muttered. And just like that, I was undercover. I needed to be sure before I blew up our whole life over what might be nothing. I'd play dumb, keep quiet, watch, and wait. I didn't let on a thing as he finished breakfast, kissed my cheek, and walked out the door. That was the morning I figured I had more to figure out. I had started a silent countdown to either blowing up my marriage or calling it all a bad dream. Only time would tell which. Nerves were my breakfast that morning, my hands jittery like I'd downed the entire pot of joe. I rang up the detective agency, the one that supposedly knows how to untangle the webs of lies without breaking a sweat. Acting the part of a clueless spouse, honestly, it should earn me an Academy Award. I plastered on the happy wife face, served up Jake's beloved medium-rare ribeyes, and tossed in some buttered peas for good measure, acting as if the world hadn't just tipped on its axis. Jake, well, he was his usual self, cracking tired jokes across the breakfast table, clueless that I was onto him, or was he? Sometimes the way he'd glance up from his phone, his eyes narrow like he smelled something fishy, made me wonder if he was wise to the game. I had to be slick, couldn't let the facade slip. Later, I slid into the car, the engine purring to life, just as my inner turmoil was. The meeting spot for this so-called detective? A coffee shop that was the epitome of nondescript, tucked between a laundromat and some hole-in-the-wall store selling knickknacks and paddywhacks. Frank was no run-off-the-mill gumshoe. Toughness clung to him, the kind that's seen enough shady corners to know what lurks in the shadows. He had a handshake that suggested I could break you, but I'll wait. "So, what's tipping you off to foul play?" Frank's voice didn't just ask the question, it demanded the truth. "It's like intuition dialed up to 11, I responded, trying not to let slip that I was nearly coming undone beneath my calm veneer. "He's secretive, dodgy, coming home when he knows I'll be zonked out, and then there's the texts." Frank's eyes didn't miss the tremor in my hands as I showed him the snapshots of Jake's texts. He scrolled through them in silence, his jaw tightening just a hair with every swipe. "We'll see who your husband's been texting. Check his habits, his lies, he won't know what hit him," he said, the last part with a shadow of a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The price tag was a punch to the gut, but I was in too deep to back out now. Let's do it, I said, even as my inner accountant screamed. Home was a minefield now, each step choreographed so Jake wouldn't suspect a thing. But the weight of the secrets turned every "I love you" into quicksand. Jake settled on the couch, the blue TV glow casting ghostly shadows. "You've been off. Everything okay?" His concern sounded almost genuine. "Yeah, just a hard day is all." I played it off, cringing inwardly at the deceit caking my words. He grunted, half listening, thumbing his phone like it was wired to his survival. "If you say so." The bedroom was my escape, but sleep was a joke. As I laid in the dark, waiting for the eventual weight of him on the other side of the bed, each creak of the house was a whisper of what might come to pass. The skies were a nasty shade of gray, and my phone wouldn't stop going off with warnings. "Tornadoes coming, Ellen," they said, and you could feel it in your bones it was true. Jake was all business, pulling stuff from the shelves like a man with a plan. "Basement. Now," he said, without looking up. "I'm grabbing supplies. You, get the weather radio from the barn." Didn't sound like a suggestion. It was getting ugly outside real quick, with the wind getting pushy. I bundled up and dashed out to the barn. The clouds were low, and I wondered if they were trying to tell me something. The barn was a black hole. I felt around for the light but gave up quick. I knew where the radio was, or I thought I did. Then, like a bad joke, the door slammed shut behind me. "Damn," I said out loud, hoping it might make me feel better. It didn't. "Jake." No answer, just the wind being a bully to everything in its path. I pushed at the door, but it was like pushing against a brick wall. "What the heck?" I muttered, and then it hit me like a slap, this was no accident. The door had been shut tight from the outside. "Jake? This ain't funny," I said, louder this time, but the wind stole my words. I banged on the wood so hard my hands hurt, but the door didn't budge. Then I got it. This was Jake's doing. "Why?" I whispered, more to myself than anyone who could hear. A bad taste settled in my mouth. I kicked at the door, not because I thought it'd open, but because it felt better than doing nothing. "Hey!" I shouted. Nothing. Just the sound of hell's bells ringing outside as the tornado chewed up everything in its path. I should have been scared for my life, I guess. But it was the betrayal that stung me fierce. You expect the weather to turn sour, but you don't expect it from your husband. "I'm stuck in here, Jake," I screamed at the door. But Jake, well, he wasn't there to hear. In the pitch black, I stumbled around, feeling dumb and lost. A radio that might save my skin was useless if I couldn't tell the world I was trapped. Minutes piled on top of each other. I felt each one. The barn was an old beast, groaning in the wind, and I thought about that tornado touching down, about how this barn would probably go first. I'd never been one to panic, but that tornado was stealing my nerve. With each boom and shake, my heart raced like a jackrabbit. This was it, then. Locked in a dark barn by the man who'd promised to always protect me, with a monster storm on the way. My heart was beating so damn loud, I could barely hear the roar of the wind picking up outside. I was banging on the barn door until my hands felt like they were on fire. Then his voice cut through the noise like a cold streak. "I'm sorry, Ellen, but this is for the best. You'll be gone, and I'll be free," Jake stated, plain as day. "Free?" My voice was shaky, raw from all the screaming. "What the hell is that supposed to mean, Jake?" There was a pause. I could imagine him out there, deciding how much to tell me. "It means I'm leaving. With her. And the money. The money we'd both worked our guts out for. The money that was supposed to be for our future." "With her," I repeated, the words tasting like poison. "Yeah, with her. You know, the cute teller from the bank? Turns out she's got a thing for guys with a little cash." I kept pounding on the door, but I could feel the fight going out of me. "And you're just gonna leave me here? For a tornado to, what?" You think it's gonna just sweep me away, and you'll tell everyone it was some tragic accident? Sounds about right, he said, without a trace of the man I thought I knew. You can't. You just can't. I was hollering now, my throat raw. Jake's voice was fading as if he was backing away. Oh, I can, Ellen. And I am. Take care now. And just like that, the footsteps were gone. I fell silent for a moment, my breath coming in hard gasps. Then I started to scream. Help! Somebody, please! I wasn't ready to give up, not by a long shot. Please! I'm in here. The barn felt like it was closing in on me, the darkness so thick I could hardly breathe. My hands hurt too much for any more banging, so I just kept on screaming. Help! Between each shout, I listened hard. Prayed for the sound of a vehicle, the distant shout of a neighbor, anything. But there was nothing over the rage of the storm. I thought back to every conversation, every look that should have told me Jake was this kind of scum. How did I not see it? But beating myself up wasn't gonna get me out of this. I needed to stay alive long enough to sort out that mess. Anybody? I yelled over the wind. Can anyone hear me? I kept hollering, my voice cracking and breaking, until I couldn't scream anymore. I sagged against the splintered door, the ache in my body nothing compared to the raw scream of betrayal. Help! Hey, anybody! I bellowed again, the words tearing at my throat, raw and angry. I was Ellen. I'd been through storms before. Not like this, sure, not locked in a barn by the man I married, wishing a tornado on me. But I'd been through tough times. And I wasn't about to quit. Not now. Help me! I'm in here. I kept on screaming, even as the world outside screamed back at me. I was yelling my lungs out, voice all scratchy, when suddenly, I heard a click. The barn door creaked on its hinges, and there stood Mr. Donnelly with his dog, going nuts at his feet. What in the hot hell are you doing hollerin' in here, Ellen? Thought the wind yanked your brains out. He grabbed my arm, none too gently, and yanked me out of the barn. I was stumbling over my own feet trying to keep up with his brisk pace. His dog, a big old black lab, was jumping around, barking like it was all a game. We gotta get you to my place, now. Mr. Donnelly shouted over the sound of the howling wind. He was serious, more serious than I'd ever seen him. We pelted down the road, the wind trying to slap us sideways. By the time we burst into Mr. Donnelly's house, my heart was doing somersaults, and my breath was coming fast and harsh. He shoved me down the stairs, before I even had time to thank him. The basement was dim, lit by a couple of bare bulbs. It smelled like damp and old newspapers. We could hear the storm pounding on the house above, but down here, it felt like another world. Coffee? Donnelly offered, and I just nodded, still trying to wrap my head around everything. While the coffee was brewing, he sat across from me, arms crossed, the dog settled at his feet. All right, Ellen. Spill it. What's got you locked up in a barn with a twister on your tail? I took a deep breath, the warm smell of coffee filling the air. Jake, I started, the name like a lead weight in my mouth. He's locked me up to get taken by the storm. Mr. Donnelly stared, his eyes hard as flints. Son of a, and here I thought he was just the usual kind of fool. Yeah, a fool, I muttered, feeling my hands ball into fists. Got a plan for every dime, just not for me. Saying it out loud, it sounded even worse. Donnelly handed me a mug, the heat from the coffee seeping into my cold fingers. Well, hell, he picked the wrong woman to mess with. His lips twitched into what might have been a smile on a good day. Outside, the storm was still tearing at the world, but inside, sipping on Mr. Donnelly's coffee, I felt something like peace. Or maybe it was just the eye of the storm. S'pose I've got some planning to do, I said, my voice steadier now. Donnelly nodded. Start with resting. You look like you've been chewed up and spat out by a coyote. Feel like it, too, I said with a weak chuckle. That's how I found myself in old man Donnelly's basement, with the storm overhead. But my own storm was just getting started. And when it hit, it wouldn't be nature's fury, it'd be mine. As I stepped out of Mr. Donnelly's basement with him right beside me, what hit me first wasn't the sight but the silence, the eerie kind that follows a big ruckus. It was like the world was holding its breath. Where the barn used to be, there was nothing but a jumble of wood scraps, broken tree limbs, and scattered stones. Looked like someone had thrown a tantrum and tore the place apart. Mom and Dad were right there, next to that mess. They were crying hard, so caught up in their grief, they didn't notice us at first. They must have thought I was gone, buried under that pile. I could see Dad's shoulders shaking, and Mom, she was just crumpled. Then there was Jake, my so-called better half, standing off to the side. The look on his face when he saw me, it was like he'd seen a ghost. He went so pale I thought he might keel over right then and there. "Mom! Dad!" I yelled, needing to pull them out of it. They spun around like they couldn't believe their eyes. Mom was on me in a flash, her arms so tight around me I could hardly breathe. "We thought," she tried to say, but couldn't finish. "You thought wrong," I told her, pulling back to look at Jake. With everyone watching, I said it straight. "This one," I tipped my head towards Jake, "locked me up in that barn. Figured I'd be history after the storm hit." The words hit like punches. Dad's face went from heartbreak to anger so fast I swear I could see the change. "What?" he said, real low and dangerous, turning to Jake. Jake tried to find the right lie, I could see it. "Now, listen." "Not a word," Dad cut him like a knife. "No room for talking now. Your lies are worth less than spit." Mom was looking at me, then at Jake, putting it together. "You did this?" The hurt was raw in her voice. "And I would have died in there if it wasn't for Mr. Donnelly," I said, thumbing towards him. Mr. Donnelly just gave a nod, like it wasn't a big deal, but we all knew different. Jake backed up a step, maybe thinking he could fade away. "Ellen, You what?" My turn to cut him off. "Hope I'd be scrapwood like the barn?" Neighbors started crowding around, picking up on the drama and the disaster, making a circle around us. I could hear them muttering, shooting looks at Jake that could scald. Someone said, "Is that true, Jake?" And all he could do was stand there, mouth working with nothing coming out. Dad stepped forward, and for a sec I thought he might just deck him. "You get gone." He pointed towards the road. "Don't want to see your face round here again." Jake took the hint and started walking, not saying another word, leaving a quiet that shouted in his wake. The neighbors, they were all buzzing and clucking, saying how they'd help us pick up the pieces, literally, and all that. It was good people doing good people things. But right then, it all just washed over me like rain off a duck's back. Mom and Dad stayed close, like they couldn't quite believe I was real and standing there. They kept touching my arm, my back, just little pats, the kind that said 1,000 things. My phone decided right then to chime in. I pulled it out and there they were, pictures that painted 1,000 foul words. Jake and some woman, all smiles, living it up. In one, they were cheersing with drinks more expensive than the new roof we'd needed. My heart kicked hard against my ribs, anger rising hot and fast in my throat. I tossed the phone to Dad, not even wanting another look. The pictures made their rounds among the neighbors faster than a rumor. Skiing and gasps added a soundtrack to the unfolding drama. "Is that, with our money?" Dad's hands were shaking, but there was nothing weak in his voice. "Looks like trust ain't all I invested in him," I said. Anger made my words come out cool and distant, like I was talking about someone else's life going up in smoke. Next to me, Mr. Donnelly spat on the ground, a well-worn sign of disgust. "Always knew the boy's smile was too slick," he muttered. Dad looked like he was calculating how much that smile had cost us in cold hard cash. "We'll be going to the lawyer first thing tomorrow," he declared. "He won't get away with this." The neighbors nodded, murmuring agreement. It was comforting, in its own way, to have folks at your back when the world turned inside out. "Tomorrow?" My mom seemed to snap then. He will answer for his sins now. I understood that feeling boiling up inside her, but I knew if we were to wring this out for what it was worth, we'd need the law on our side. We'll get him, Mom. We'll get every cent back. It was a promise I intended to keep if it was the last thing I did. We spent a few minutes going back and forth about what to do next, but it was mostly just to keep our hands busy while our minds raced. What to fix first, what to sell, how to get back on our feet. I guess this is what they call a fresh start, I said, trying to find a silver lining. Dad let out a puff of a laugh. Fresh start, yeah. We'll clean this up. We always do. Underneath the turmoil, I could feel something new taking root. Maybe it was determination or just plain stubbornness. Either way, it felt good, like the first step on a long road to something better. As the twilight shadows stretched over us, the flicker of flashlights and murmurs of our neighbors helping to clean up became the evening's choir. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I looked around at the people gathered, ready to help us rebuild, and felt a surge of gratitude. This was bad, but with folks like these, we'd manage. The clang of the courthouse door echoed in my ears as I stepped into the hallway, the sound of finality. My shoulders, which seemed to have been near my ears for months, finally relaxed. Outside, the sun was fighting through the gray clouds, and it felt right, like the universe was agreeing with the judge. I could get used to this, I mumbled, half to myself, half to the world. Mom, who hadn't let go of my hand since we walked in, gave it a squeeze. To justice? Me too, Ellen. Dad was a few steps ahead, talking to Mr. Donnelly. They were patting each other's backs, almost too rough, but that was just how they showed relief, I suppose. The police had done their job, taken Mr. Donnelly's statement, all the shady emails, and the photos off my phone as evidence. They moved faster than I thought they would, or could. Even Jake couldn't squirm his way out of this one. "Ya hear what that lawyer said just now?" Dad was almost grinning as he caught up to us. Even his fancy suit couldn't help Jake snake his way out. Mom snorted. "Yeah, and did you see Jake's face when the judge handed down the sentence? Like he swallowed a bug. Good riddance." We stopped outside, the cold air feeling sharp, but I welcomed it. It was bracing, full of a new beginning. "I just want to thank you guys." I looked at Mr. Donnelly, for believing in me. He waved me off. "No thanks needed. Justice had its day, finally." Dad nodded. "We're a family. A unit. Ain't nothing that's gonna break that, you hear?" "I hear you, Dad. Loud and clear," I replied. As we walked towards the car, there was this tight feeling in my chest. Not from sadness or fear, but something else, relief, maybe. It was hard to put a name on it. "Divorce papers are in," I said, more to the world than anyone in particular. "And the business is clean of him." "Now that," Dad said as he keyed the engine alive, "is music to my ears. And we can finally get that new roof, huh?" Mom's attempt at a joke made all of us laugh, a real, genuine laugh. The engine hummed softly as we began the drive home, the route familiar, yet it felt different somehow. At a red light, I looked out the window at folks just going about their day, oblivious to the small victory in our car. It wasn't a shout it from the rooftops kind of victory, but it was ours. As we turned onto the main street that led back to our home, the fields on either side lay fallow, but it wouldn't be long until they were green again, alive and full of potential. Life had a way of pushing through, of continuing against all odds. And so would I. With Jake out of the picture and justice served in the courtroom, it was like the world had given me permission to start over. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared, but there was excitement there too. And as we drove on, the sun broke fully through the clouds, bathing the car in a warm light, and I knew that somehow, everything was going to be all right.